Thank you guys so much for allowing me to give a share of the Dharma this morning. I appreciate you. I will do my very best. I have some loose thoughts, and last time I shared, I was talking about, I left off on this kind of, I mentioned we live in a time that's between stories. And Zazen aligns us with the fragmented nature of our present moment. So I mentioned that last time, and I want to kind of pick that up and see where we go. How much time do we have? I want to make sure we...
30.
30?
As much time as you need.
30 snows.
I don't want to keep it. 30 minutes? Is that what it is?
30 minutes, yeah,
30, 40.
40.
30 to 40. Oh, okay.
30 have to go somewhere. I'll let you know when I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay. All right, very good. And I really want, I know that you have discussions at times, and this is fantastic. I'm glad to see that. And I hope that some of the things that I say will lead us to discussion within the talk, or if you want to wait afterwards, that's fine too. But either way, just the discussing helps us to clarify what we're actually saying and doing. I mean, where is that sutra we just read? We just chanted the faith in mind, talking about how words just don't capture truth. That was one of the many. Thank you. Page 12. That was one of the many things that was said in here. This is actually when I was reading it, as we were chanting it together. Thank you. I was saying this is a very dangerous sutra if you don't understand it.
Yes.
Right? It really is. I mean, there's some things in here. It could be very transformative, but it can also be dangerous if we don't understand it in the spirit in which I think it's meant to be. Yeah, talking all about how our mind works right here. Talking about not discriminating. Right? This is to help us enter into what we call the ultimate dimension. The whole sutra is about exiting the relative, but not completely. We never get out of the relative dimension, but to awaken to the ultimate dimension, which is beyond all of these distinctions that our mind makes, up and down, high and low, good and bad. So one way to think about how do we embody that in Zen practice, and one way to look at this is at what we're wearing here, right? This Buddha robe some of us are wearing. You can see folks wearing the blue, called a rakusu, or an abbreviated robe, and several of you are sewing a robe. And I'm wearing this same thing. It's a Buddha robe that's wrapped all around my body. So what does this mean? What does this signify for us? And when you see it, you might have certain ideas about it. I think a common idea is that somehow by wearing the robe, we're somehow maybe there's an elitism taking place. Some people are better than other people. That might be a distinction that the mind creates. So this is an example where, right, when we look at this song and start to chant it, we can see like how our mind discriminates. Well, some people are wearing a blue robe, but I don't have one. Or that guy has a brown one, I don't have one. So what is this? What does this actually mean? We should know. We should get a sense of this, especially if we're going to wear it. What it actually signifies. So there are many reasons, first of all, why people would wear these, and those of you that are wearing them will have your own reasons. I'm not going to give them to you, but I'll just share a little bit from my own understanding here. And I would say perhaps the worst reason to wear one of these is to gain some kind of power or privilege or prestige in some way. That would be the worst reason to want to wear this. It's actually a commitment. How I see this robe, it's a commitment to ourself to release, to let go of worldly power. That's very different, and that's in alignment with this world peace ceremony that we just partook in. The cause of such a lot of the pain in our world today is because of people wanting to grasp power. If you think about our world leaders, and or at different times of history where you have a person in power or a group of people in power that want to stay in power. That's the source of non-peace. But we do that too in our families. When we get the options or the opportunities, we might be in a position of power. For example, I'm a father, and that puts me in a position of power over my son. And I could abuse that. I could easily abuse that. And I have to say, it's not easy to release that power. I've been in situations with him where I felt he wasn't doing what I want him to do. Have you ever felt that with your, and so in those cases, I could wield my power, even though, on a world global scale, it doesn't seem like it's very significant power. It's just a father and son. But in that relationship, it's actually very significant. And if you put yourself into the position of the son, the person who's vulnerable, the person who doesn't have that power, it's the entire world, right? Your father or your parents are the entire world for you, especially when you're young, and you create a lasting imprint on that child through the way that you relate to them. So world peace isn't just about getting our world leaders to behave better and to release power. It's about looking at ourselves and the ways that we ourselves hold on to power in the little relationships that we have. And it starts in our families. And it's, for me, it's involved looking, when I see the ways in which I hold on to power. I'm lucky first that I have this practice, right? That I've made a commitment to releasing the power. Okay, that's something I've committed to. And at the same time, I notice I also hold on, I hoard it. And so the practice is there to remind me, oh, wait a minute, let it go, let it go. Or my wife is there to remind me, okay, let it go. Daishin, you're holding on a little tight here. Go into the other room and take a time out. Right, that's what we need, some time out time for ourselves. And so the robe is to help us remember. We wear it to, in part, to make ourselves vulnerable. Why I wear this, one of the reasons I wear this is because it puts me in a vulnerable position, but I do it on purpose. I make the choice to do that. So I want to make that distinction between vulnerability and power. Right? Power gives you the ability to do things, to manipulate, to get your way. Vulnerability is a different experience. We feel it's like a crab without a shell, a soft shell crab. You put on the robe and it's like you're willing to be soft on the front side. You're willing to be in a very literal and animalistic sense to be eaten, right? Your front side is exposed, and animals can eat your innards, right? However, look what it means. This is also, but the Buddha path is really not about being Buddhist. It's about being fully human. To wake up, being vulnerable is something that is what we all we come into the world so vulnerable, and our posture of sitting upright is a entranceway into that vulnerability. So you don't have to wear a robe to do this, but we do need to develop some honesty here with what it means to be a human being. And if we take an evolutionary, like long view of time, we can start to see how human beings have actually evolved to be very vulnerable creatures, some of the most vulnerable on the planet. We don't have an outer shell like some of or insects have an exoskeleton. In other words, what's hard for us on the inside is hard for them on the outside. Or some of the mollusks, they have a hard outer surface so that they can't be penetrated easily. What else? Animals. Almost, we're one of the very few animals, actually we're the only ones, that primates, that can sit upright for any length of time. In fact, we spend almost all of our life walking on two legs, whereas every other animal does what? Right? They're walking on four legs, and that protects their front side. The back side is different. We don't have, so looking at ourselves physically, right, anatomically, our backside is not as vulnerable. It's the hard part. It's the strong part. That's where our spine is. But the front side is much more vulnerable to predation. And yet, as a species, over time, we've evolved to sit upright and to stand and to walk. Right? These are the three postures that the Buddha talks about: sitting, standing, and walking. This is the miracle of what it means to be human. Forget about being Buddhist. Right? What it means to be human is that we physically sit upright. That's amazing if you really think about that. That's what we're sitting here doing zazen. We're sitting here and we're not doing anything in particular, but sitting upright and marveling in that ability to sit upright. Right? That's where our mind can go. If it goes anywhere, it's like, no, I am Dogen. Another thing I mentioned, Dogen was talking about Nunanji. Remember, what does that mean?
Soft and gentle heart.
Yeah, soft and gentle, or soft and flexible heart mind. Another thing he said when he came back to China is he said, what did you get? And Dogen's response was, my nose is vertical and my eyes are horizontal. It seems like, well, aren't we all like that? Well, but see, that's it right there. That, like, anatomically, we have this amazing gift of a body, and it's structured in a particular way. And until we start to compare ourselves with other species, not in a way that makes us better than or worse than, but just when we start to compare, we start to see, oh, my anatomy it's structured in a certain way. And it's structured to allow us for the greatest amount of vulnerability, which is absolutely crazy from a survival perspective. It's absolutely absurd that we've evolved as primates in this way, because we're completely vulnerable. And that's why we need some form of religion or spirituality, because we're not the species that will easily run away from things, or we will either run away or fight. That's our fight or flight or freeze. These are all survival mechanisms that we have. We also have within us because we come from other species that use them, right? Fight is something that we know intimately. If somebody threatens us, we get our adrenaline starts pumping, we get our fists together and we're ready to go at it. Or if we realize that our opponent is much larger than us, we start to get the adrenaline going to the legs, and we start to learn how to scoot out there as quick as possible. Or the other survival mechanism is to faint, where that's a survival. You play dead. That's what the possum does, right? And other mammals, they play dead. They can just it's a survival mechanism. People with certain degree of PTSD will feign death. in order to survive a difficult situation. If you're dead, nobody's going to bother you, right? And yet there's another path that has opened up thanks to being human beings. And this is the only path we're really ever going to find some meaning in, and that is this path of vulnerability, this path of knowing that, yeah, we are going to die. We spend significant amount of time thinking about the fact that we're going to die. And we can see the outer form of that with funeral or memorial services. And we know this is eventually going to happen to us. And we spend it guides our life in a certain way. There's something to us that excites our imagination, knowing that we will die. Something excites our imagination, knowing that we are this vulnerable. It excites our imagination in a way that it doesn't for other species. We'll become very creative with our life, knowing that it's limited. Okay, if I know that my life is not going to be around, I'm not going to be here forever, well, there's something here to do. There's something I've come here to do. And you might not be totally clear what that is. I'm not here to say what that is. But tapping into the vulnerable place within us is the way to unwrap that. There's something important about finding in the vulnerability that it takes courage for us to enter into a vulnerable state. That takes more courage than fighting or fleeing. Right? I mean, it takes courage. Actually, there's no courage in fighting or fleeing. It's a natural reaction. It's just what we do habitually. It's not a choice. We just do it to survive. And for humans, there's another way. Courage is not about winning. It's not about fighting or overcoming something, but stepping into this mind that is vulnerable. Right? The nose is vertical, the eyes are horizontal. There's no shell, what we do instead though, is when we are acting out of habit, acting out of earlier evolutionary responses, what we do is stockpile nuclear weapons, right? That's our form of protection, nationally and internationally. We stockpile weapons, or we think we need to have a weapon. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I mean, here's the country, I'm speaking in the country that, waives the Second Amendment and all that. There's a story, it brings to mind a story of, those of you who think, I gotta get rid of my gun. It brings to mind a story of William Penn and George Fox. George Fox is the founder of Quakerism. You guys know, raise your hand if you know the Quakers. You know the Quakers, yeah. My teacher's father would tell my teacher when she was a young girl, when he wanted her to be quiet, he would say, Quaker meeting. So I didn't know very much about the Quakers. And so the Zen Center where I trained at was just a couple of blocks away from our Zen Center. So we walked there every few months and participate in their Quaker meeting. And so I learned a little bit about, I don't know very much, but just a little bit. And my teacher was fond of telling this story of George Fox and William Penn. You know who William Penn is? Mm-hmm. Right? He's what Pennsylvania is named after, Penn's Woods. And William Penn, he converted at one point in his life to Quakerism. And William Penn was a fighter. He had a broadsword, short sword, long sword that he would carry. But he converted to Quakerism, which is a pacifist form of Christianity. They don't believe in wars and in fighting. So he asked George Fox, what should I do with my swords now that I'm a Quaker? And he was expecting George Fox to say, well, you got to get rid of them now. You've made a commitment to this path. But George Fox didn't say that. He said, William, wear them as long as thee can. Right? He didn't tell him to get rid of them. He's not. So in other words, there's not, in a similar way in Zen, there's not this external figure telling you this is what you've got to do. You'll do it when you're ready to do it. You'll do it. You'll just you won't have the need for that. You'll figure it out. So what happens when you force somebody to abstain from something? It just makes it the urge just becomes stronger. You tell somebody don't do this, it only makes them want to do it more, or they feel guilty that they're still doing this thing, whatever that thing is, right? And I think that spirit is something that we need to cultivate also in Zen. There's lots of precepts, and they're really helpful guidelines for helping us to live, like not to harm anybody, not to do good, to purify the mind. These are things, though, that we have to take responsibility for ourselves, and it's not somebody external saying, "Hey, you." Now, if you're hurting somebody, and somebody sees you doing that, or you see somebody else hurting somebody, either with the way that you're speaking or your physical actions, that's a realm where we do need to step in and say, hey, this is not appropriate behavior, because we're here to protect each other as well. But we get trapped, I think, in the United States, we get trapped in this shame and guilt cycle. And that's what I'm trying to address here, is that shame and guilt cycle. This is for the folks that are trying their best to be good, right? And we have this story that we grew up with, where there's an external authority figure, whether it is a parent or God, looking at us and saying, do it the right way, or you're going to go down there. You're going to go down to hell. Buddhism has a different story around this. It's not better, it's not worse, but the story, the Zen story is, there's many stories. I'll just say that, there's many stories, but here's one about heaven and hell. There was a really pious monk, and this man who followed him said, hey, where are you going to go after you die? And the monk said, straight to hell. And the man was just so surprised. I said, but you're a good person. Why would you go to hell? He says, there's plenty of people up in heaven, and there's plenty of good folks up in heaven already. I need to go down to hell because that's where I can be of service. So heaven isn't a place that somebody throws you, or hell is not a place that somebody delivers you after you die. It's actually a choice. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go to heaven? That's a choice. Do you want to go to hell? That's a choice. Right? And you can choose to go to hell to save all beings. Actually, we're in hell right now. Hell isn't a place it isn't a geographic location, but is a state of mind. And we periodically cycle through heaven and hell in our daily life. And Zen practice is about recognizing which realm we happen to be in. There's no shame in being in hell. That's one of the 6 realms of existence that we abide in from time to time. And there's a great shame in being in heaven. Don't go to heaven. That's not a good place to go. Because you can't hear the Dharma there. You can't hear the Dharma in heaven. You're too blissed out. Right? You're too blissed out. I'm not saying, and that's another thing, is we get caught up in body and feeling. We think that we're not supposed to feel good when we're practicing. But actually, we can feel good. We can feel happiness. We can feel joy. We can, whatever it is that you're feeling. Okay, so getting back to this robe business, the Rakusu. a commitment to releasing worldly power. And just as the Buddha did when he left home, right? The Buddha is our kind of a central figure here. And when he left home, he was a prince. He was slated to be a king. He had in front of him all of the power that he could possibly desire, right? He could do whatever he wanted, wielding that power. And he decided, you know what, there's something more compelling than fighting, being a fighter. That's what he was. He was a warrior, right? World peace. He was a warrior. He could fight. That's what he did well at. There's something more here that I'm missing, and I want to go to that. So he's opening up to this. He must have, great vulnerability, leaving behind his wife and newborn son. I mean, I don't know how he must have felt about that. Leaving behind certainly he could have been an excellent king if he wanted to. But see, we have this choice. This is what the story is opening us up to, is that we have this opportunity to make a choice. You might not think about it in our lives like that because we don't see ourselves as having access maybe to so much power. But I would encourage us to think about our lives on a, even though we might not be princes or kings, we have a degree of power, and we do try to hold on to it. That's what propelled me to this practice. I was teaching elementary school, and I was wielding, it was fifth graders, 10-year-olds, and I was wielding my power because that was what was natural. I was only 22 years old. And all of the habits from the way that I grew up, the way that I saw my parents behave with me, they were just coming forward with these children that I was responsible for. And what was coming forward, even though I had some training in Zen, that's not what came forward. What came forward was, hey, shut up, sit down. And I said that in multiple ways over multiple times until I realized I wasn't doing it right. I realized I'm miserable, and these children are miserable. And you know what I'm teaching them? I'm teaching them how to yell at each other. And that's what I'm seeing. After 5 months, I realized they're just acting like I am. Thanks to my practice, I could see that. See, they're just being like I am. They don't know. And so I made a decision there. I had started practicing, and I was practicing in the Vipassana tradition at that time, and listening to, at that time we had tapes. I was listening to Joseph Goldstein talk about, what was it? I don't remember the title of his Dharma talk, but I thought he was talking about experiencing sensation in the body and really honing in on what we're actually feeling, and really getting close to it, experience it. This is what we do when we're sitting for long periods of time. Really get closer to what we're actually feeling. And it was about fear. That's right. It was about fear and anxiety, and how we are often triggered in certain ways. Something happens, a person says something, or we're in a situation, and our anxiety rises up. And without thinking about it, we'll respond in a protective way: fight, flight, or flee. Fight, flight, or feign. But assuming we're in a safe environment, like a Zen center should be, then we have this other option available to us of looking closely at our fears, at our anxieties, watching them in a loving way, and really honing in on what's actually happening here. We might not be even aware that we have fear in us when it's arising. And so when I was with those 10-year-olds, I thought to myself, here, I'm going to start practicing this right now. I don't have anything to lose because this job sucks. I'm not getting, or if I get fired, no, you know what? I'll be happy as hell. So I thought, I don't have anything to lose here. I'm going to watch my own reaction and see what's going on here. So when the kids were getting ready to they knew how I was going to respond to certain situations. They knew I was going to start yelling, and so I decided to do something revolutionary. I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to watch. I can't. I'm acting out of. I notice tightness in my chest. I notice tightness in my abdomen, and anything I say right now is going to be unhelpful. Right? It's like this sutra here. Any words that come out of your mouth are going to be just unhelpful. And I was risking my job doing this too. I thought, you know what, I could get fired by not saying anything or telling these kids what to do. I could get fired by, we live in such an effed up world where we can get fired if we don't tell somebody what to do. That's effed up. I wanted to say that. Think about that for a second. We live in a world where you can lose your job if you don't tell somebody what to do. Right? Because we think that we have this idea that some people know more than other people, right? It's not that we shouldn't tell people what to do, especially if they're hurting others or hurting themselves, or they need to learn some skill. It's not that we shouldn't be in a teacher-student relationship. But if we think as a teacher that we are teaching somebody something that they don't already have, then we're misguided. And especially when it comes to children and quote unquote teaching children. That certainly needs some qualifications. We need to keep children safe. And we may be in positions where we have to say, hey, this isn't right. And we might need to explain to them, right, that like what's going on, or at the very least, bring them aside and be like, you know what, I notice you've got some real anger going on inside, or maybe you feel some anger inside, or some, at the appropriate time. There's all kinds of methods and ways for that, but we need to bring the rational and the awake brain online for the child, and we only do that by modeling it ourselves. Right, by not responding out of reactivity. So I watched myself here. Look at all of this fear that I have in myself. Let me just stay with this and breathe with it. And I did that for like 20 minutes, just in front of these kids, and then something really magical happened there, where they all of a sudden they started wondering what I was doing. And they started to be quiet, one after the other, and just like a wave of silence came over the room. They were completely quiet. And at that moment, I should have used that moment to probably say something, probably offer some gratitude, or be revealing in some way, show my own vulnerability through words. But I didn't, because I was so shocked. I was so shocked by it, and I was like, wow, what the F just happened here? And I just proceeded with the lesson that I had, and nothing got changed, unfortunately. And then the next class came in. See, this is where words can be helpful, when you use them to demonstrate your own vulnerability. The next class came in, and the previous class tipped them off. Hey, Mr. McCabe's going to do this thing. Don't pay attention to him. See, they didn't understand what I was doing, and we have to be able to. We need to be able to articulate ourselves, and unfortunately, we don't learn this. Hopefully, we come to the Zen Center to begin to learn how to articulate our vulnerability, right? And so we get these messages again and again about the impermanent state of existence. Because we're not getting those messages. We're getting the messages from the wider culture that we're going to live forever as long as you wear the right cream and get the right hair transplant and all that stuff. Get the right food, exercise, etc. Right? We get a different message here that our body decays. We get old. We start getting saggy skin. Right? We get sick. So I ended up actually losing my job because of that. I tried to be vulnerable again. And the second class around was much more brutal to me. And they were my teachers. So that's why I'm saying we gotta see children in a different light. not as us controlling, but as us learning. And in the process of learning, we work together as a team, right? And we might have to deal with the egos of our children, right? That's part of it too. But the practice is bringing us back. It's turning the light, shining it inward on ourselves. This is where world peace starts. So we can protest wars and things like that, and that's fine. But our families and the way that we work with our children or our friends or the relationships at work, all of these things are where the seeds of war and the seeds of peace get sown. It's in our society. So we don't have to go far. We don't have to go overseas. We don't have to do something heroic. It's just looking at how you are in a relationship to others. I'm a work in progress, believe me. I'm a work in progress, for sure. My son is my teacher, as is my wife, and I'm learning from you guys too. So wearing the robe in public, especially, getting back to this idea of the robe, is I'm noticing my own vulnerability. It's very vulnerable to wear a rakusu out in public. I do so when I'm teaching in college class. I teach a world religions class, and I wear my robe on purpose. Not this one, but the rakusus that you all see. I wear it on purpose because it feels so damn awkward. Right? It feels really awkward to wear it in front of a bunch of 17-year-olds who are highly self-critical or critical of others. I don't like wearing it. Let's just say that. I don't like wearing it. They think they might have all kinds of weird thoughts. But and the thing is, though, they'll have weird thoughts about me even if I don't wear them. And if I don't wear it, I'll put on some kind of protective layer, looking the normal way of dress, whatever that. That's a protective way of looking. You want to blend in with everybody. I do that too. When I'm with my family, I'm not wearing robes at all. I'm blending in. So there's a place for blending in. There's a place for going with the status quo, with the norm, and then there's a place for opening ourselves up to vulnerability. And especially if we are in a position of power, like a teaching position, we do well for our psyche to choose vulnerability in those places. We do well to choose it. So, like in the example of being with students, choosing that vulnerability, as opposed to wearing something or doing something that I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm making sense here, but let me come back here. So yeah, that's what I thought I was going to say, is that the feelings of vulnerability and awkwardness encourage the development of mindfulness. Right? It encourages the development of self-awareness. It could be something as simple as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, right? That feeling of the awkwardness of using in my case, my left hand to brush my teeth with, your whole body has to learn how to do that again. And there was a Tibetan teacher who used to wear a tie and a really tight shirt and stuff. And his students would ask him, "Why are you doing this?" He says, "Because I need to. There's something important to him. There was something important to him about being uncomfortable, right? Doing the thing that makes us uncomfortable and choosing it, though. So we come to here. We're sitting for 25 or 30 minutes or longer. We're choosing discomfort. There's another muscle that we're developing, and that is that courage to be vulnerable. And we'll get tested, right? We come here. This is this is not the proving grounds. This is like the gym, right? It's like the spiritual gymnasium. You come here to get stronger, but then the proving ground is your relationships. Have you really? How well are you at this, really? Can you go back to your spouse or your children or your bosses? Can you go back to them and demonstrate when you're in a power position, demonstrate the release of power, the letting go of that power. Okay, so what the last thing I want to say about this robe is that the highest robe is called the funzoe. Does anybody speak Japanese here? Funzoe. You guys don't know what funzoe is, so you're gonna have to trust me on this. What I just say here, and you can look it up. Funzoe. Fun is the pronunciation of it's written fun. 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 Funzoe. A is the clothing. So zo means a wipe to wipe something with, and so when we were sewing on my teacher's funzoe, it was for a mountain seat ceremony, and there's a special pattern that you put into it, and as we were putting it together, it was meant to be like really, really gorgeous and beautiful. And as we were putting it together, one of the Japanese nuns reminded us, we're not doing this for human eyes, but for Buddha's eyes. We're not sewing this robe for human eyes. In other words, the human mind gets caught up in these distinctions of good and bad, high and low, up and down. We're sewing this for the eyes of the Buddha. We're sewing this for the eyes of the Buddha. And so this funzoe, this is the highest robe. You can find it in museums, in fact, in Japan. It's really elevated. And funzoe means shit wiping cloth. It's a shit wiping cloth. Right? That's why this is brown. To hide the stains. No, I'm just kidding. But this is Zen turns everything on its head, everything upside down. What we think is really should be like spiritually great, we call it funzoe. It's a shit wiping cloth. And that's part of our practice too, to see in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, in the Gita, he says, to see a nugget of gold and a piece of shit as the exact same equal. That's our practice. See a nugget of gold, piece of shit as exactly equal, as having equal value. That's what we do. That's the meaning of this okesa. It's to equalize. It's to equalize. There's nothing special about this. Or if you see it as special, also see it. Don't forget, it's also a shit wiping cloth. If you see it as special. Right? That's how we change, that's how we shift out of this mind that makes distinctions. Good, bad, high, low, up, down. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions or comments,
I do.
come up.
So are you saying that you don't think it's right to discipline children, or if so, how do you discipline children?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but I mean, certainly we have to say things at times. Are you thinking of a particular example?
Well, just in your class, and because I'm I guess more toward the disciplinary.
Yeah, right. I know it. So I guess where I'm coming from with this, I'm not an expert at disciplining. First of all, I'll say that. I'm still learning how to do that. Where I came from in my own kind of upbringing, there was a physical punishment for doing things wrong, as well as emotional abuse. And I think a lot of us come from that kind of a background and setting. And so putting the Buddhist precepts into practice is to refrain from physical punishment and psychological or verbal abuse. It's to refrain from those things. Now, that can keep us occupied. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That can keep us occupied. And that's the path to healing. Now, how you discipline is something I'm still learning.
Okay.
But for sure, to refrain from all evil and to refrain from all evil is to recognize in me, I have this element of, in my genetics, having experienced physical abuse and emotional abuse, verbal abuse. That's inside my genes because my mother, but not just her, but other previous generations, that's how they did it. And so the practice for me then my initial response with my son is not do no harm. It's what my mother did to me, because that's what's in my physical body. Right? So that looks like not picking up a child when they're crying. And that's what emotion, like physically, that's what it is. Or when the child is misbehaving, using force, verbal force. I know better not to hit, but using the verbal force is still there. And the precept is saying, don't do anything that harms. And if I'm really honest, I'm like, that's actually, I didn't improve our relationship. I made it worse when I said that thing to him. And if my wife is there, she'll say, go to timeout. So we don't have to figure out how to discipline. We need to figure out our own history and what is right for us. I'm just saying what's right for me. And I want to encourage you guys to do that for yourself. Honest self-inventory. What is the ways that you've been harmed, and how can we not pass that on to the next generation? What that looks like, and so that'll keep us plenty occupied. It still means we have to learn how to discipline, though, for sure. We need to learn skillful ways of doing that. And there's loads of ways out there, just trying to think, using incentives and things for children, that goes a long way. Having like, if you do this, I'll give you that. So rewarding positive behavior, for example, as opposed to corporally punishing negative behavior. Rewarding positive behavior is kind of a standby, I think. Yeah.
Well, kind of to your point, don't ask me about discipline either, but so when you were talking about vulnerability and power, what I heard it almost then seems like the definition of those two words change depending on what perspective you're coming at. So if you're coming from a worldly perspective and you're talking about vulnerability and, you put it in the context of kids and power, what you're talking about, like power being the ability to exert your own will to influence whatever outcome you want within the lives of others and in your surroundings. And vulnerability becomes like a lack of self-agency, a lack of being able to.
Well, in that case, you're forced into vulnerability.
Exactly.
Right. So
but when you turn it and you're coming from the perspective of a higher self, vulnerability could maybe then be called being your authentic self.
Yeah.
And power then maybe could be, I don't know, like power could be empowering yourself to be your authentic self and empowering other people to be their authentic self, and then co-creating together.
Amen.
And so it is interesting when you're dealing with like power and vulnerability and boundaries, especially with kids. You do have to be really conscientious, like where are you coming in at? Like, how are you coming into that situation? Are you coming from your small self or from the big self? And it's tricky.
So family is the proving ground for all of this stuff. It really is.
Or workplace.
Definitely not Sangha though.
This is where
Cool here.
this is where we
Work
get to
out
practice it. We get to practice it here, and Sangha members certainly as well. Absolutely, especially if your Sangha becomes your workplace. Because that's there too.
Anyone else have any thoughts, questions, comments?
I'll offer this one up. A reflection that's sort of related to this. Last week I work construction, and we have this macho, like sort of male centric culture, but there are these moments when it doesn't feel that way. I feel vulnerability, and what struck me last week is I find when I am open, like I think one is issues of mental health, like struggles with mental health. I'm just very open about struggling with these things.
Hmm.
Found that it is very well received. Like all the fears that I may have had about not being adequate as a man, being rejected in that context, haven't really come to fruition. And maybe some of it is because I've achieved in other realms, like I did martial arts for a while or whatever, and so that gets your foot in the door to be able to be open. And I think it's because it allows other people to be open.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so you got, especially if you have some kind of something that has raised your self-esteem on some level, you have some level of self-respect that allows us to be able to be vulnerable in the first place. Yeah.
It gives you the sort of courage.
It gives you the courage. Yeah, it does.
Courage.
Yeah. So I'm not against that at all. Yeah. If you want to desire to achieve something, whether it's a degree or something else or whatever it is, that's a belt in karate.
And that's interesting. What you pointed out was that, your courage to be open allowed other people to be open.
It does seem to work that way.
Yeah.
Like the way that you'd hope.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can say that without the fear around it, that certainly helps others. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I couldn't do that when I had another job and I was painting houses. And it was a similar kind of machismo kind of circles. And I had a hard time opening up in those circles. But I think if I could have, I would have, yeah, so you're ahead of me in that.
Yeah, I experienced much more of that sort of fear when I was younger.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, feeling otherness, not being good.
Right, yeah.
There are some advantages of getting older.
I
Look at my age, you
I'm
just don't
enjoying
care
it.
anymore.
Yeah, I'm enjoying
If that's all, I guess we'll have a few announcements. You want to talk about
I've sent out an email to most everybody here. Some of you have already responded about College of St. Mary reached out to us because they're having a music event at St. Cecilia's Cathedral on two different saints, which they found out are actually based on the life of the Buddha. So they're going to reserve a special section for us because they would like Buddhists to be present. And I always like things that are, involving interfaith dialogue and mutual respect between religions. So if you haven't responded and you want to come, please let me know because I'm going to give a tally by Wednesday. I'm going to give them a tally of how many of us are coming. We have 7 so far.
It's a fascinating story too. I don't know, maybe you haven't heard this, but when the Silk Road was a big trading avenue, the story of the Buddha moved from out of India into Islamic territory as well as all the way to Europe. But it didn't go. But the people who picked up this story, they didn't realize it was the story of the life of the Buddha, and they made it into their own story. And in Europe, it actually became the story of a saint, Saint Jehoshaphat. So there's a book recently put out by Donald Lopez, who's a scholar of Buddhism, a really top-notch scholar, and he tracks this whole. If you like the details, you can go into it, but he tracks how the Buddha became a Christian saint. It's an amazing story, and now Christianity acknowledges that this is actually the story of the Buddha. I was looking under saints in the Catholic Church, and there is a Saint Jehoshaphat. And on this one website, it said this saint was, it made the connection with the story of the Buddha. So there's some acknowledgement there that, oh yeah, we use the Buddha story. And they didn't know it was a Buddha story. And he actually used it to convert Buddhists to Christianity.
That's what the saints are for.
This
Yeah.
sounds familiar.
And the musical events at the Cecilia's Cathedral are always really, really good.
It's a beautiful cathedral.
Yeah. As far as other upcoming events, please check into our website, which we checked yesterday, last night was down.
Oh,
Didn't somebody tell me that?
Fergus was talking about that.
Oh, Fergus, yeah, okay.
Downtown.
But at any rate, there is a tab for events and for upcoming events, so please check in on that. Daishin is here generally every third Sunday of the month. He's off schedule this month for other reasons, but so the next time he comes is 17th around the 17th of March,
Mhm,
somewhere
yeah.
around there. And it's set up as a kind of a family focused weekend for those of you who want to bring family into the practice or to
Yeah.
activities.
I'll just say a little bit about it, what I'm thinking. I don't have it all, and I'll work with my wife about this too, because we have the plan that my whole family will come, including my in-laws. So I'm thinking like Saturday night we'll have a potluck on that third weekend of March. And Saturday morning, maybe some kind of a kids program that involves arts, maybe doing some chanting, short periods of sitting, just like a couple of minutes, depending on the ages. Maybe some outdoor walking meditation. And that would be in the morning. And in the afternoon, I'm toying with the possibility of maybe doing some Zen art. We can, or maybe tracing the sutras or something. That would be less family oriented, but you could also have kids join you there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking on Saturday. And Sunday would be a usual Sunday event.
Maybe a movie night?
Oh yeah, movie. Yeah, we were thinking about a movie like something like